Alrighty, welcome back to Shove and Ball. I am Aaron Chow, accompanied by my co-host John Harris. As always, we are back to share our thoughts, reactions, etc. to the last week of the NFL season of this season, 2023-2024. Obviously week 18, as they literally constructed it, scripted not disappoint, as always. So that'll be fun to go over, and we already have head coach firings happening, and maybe some, who knows, maybe more. With our luck, another one or two will happen before this episode, gets put out, and then, we'll be behind on that. But it'd be like that in sports media. So nonetheless, let's dive right into it. As we're going to go over all the games, of course. And we're going to start with, at the top, with the Pittsburgh Steelers and Baltimore Ravens. They kicked it off week 18 for us. Of course, Ravens resting majority of their starters, except I think, Clowney got his incentive and such. But obviously Steelers playing for basically punching their ticket in. They needed a few other dominoes to fall, but obviously this was a first for them, as they had to win, I believe. So they do take care of business, obviously 17-10. Very Pittsburgh game where not a lot of offense, of course, with the score, and it was just rainy and gross. If you did watch this game, if you skipped it, that's perfectly fine, understandable. Nonetheless, though, John, what were your thoughts in regards to the Steelers punching their ticket into the playoffs here?
It's the most Steelers thing that could have happened. The Ravens, obviously they benched the starters, so nobody's surprised here that Pittsburgh was able to come out with the win. But it's still impressive nonetheless that Pittsburgh has managed another 10-win season. Mike Tomlin does it again. Every year, I feel like this man and this team is going to fall off, and I probably declared that it would be this year at some point during the year. And yet here they are once again, 10-7 in the playoffs. So, like I said, although this game isn't super interesting in and of itself, I think the end result of the season, I don't know how they keep doing it.
Yeah, well, I think it goes to show a little bit of culture. Obviously, if they got good pieces and good coaching, and they have a mentality, as we mentioned. Like there is this, like I said, the weather. This type of game is their style. Now it does hurt for their playoff prospects. T.J. Watt got hurt in this one. So it looks like an MCL sprain, so that looks like it's going to be bad. So he's definitely probably not going to be 100%. I'm not a doctor, but who knows if he'll even play next week. I will say in regards to their offense recently, I think the offensive line, which was a huge criticism for us, especially for me, it's gotten better. It's starting to get actually pretty solid in regards to just being a good run blocking offensive line, and then they do things off the play action and such. And I want to give credit to Mason Rudolph too, because there's a reason they've kind of been riding his hot hand, and it just seems a lot like he's more willing to let plays develop, take the shots downfield, trust in the offensive line and such. So and then Pittsburgh, playing great defense on top of that. But yeah, it's just crazy considering Pittsburgh. And then, what was it, 2-3 weeks ago? I'm sure you saw a load of it too. They're calling for his head again, John. They're like, oh man, this might be the year that we need to get rid of Tomlin. And how does he respond? 3 straight wins to end the season and punches the ticket in the playoffs. And also just once again to some of those, maybe not the same Tomlin naysayers, or some of them are probably the same ones. I remember too, there's a big criticism, right after he got the job, people put an asterisk on his Super Bowl, because, he inherited Bill Cowher's team, which is a little bit true, but hey, we're seeing that, it wasn't just he inherited a really good team and got lucky. He's built and had sustained success with this organization and built that culture that many organizations are looking for. So good for Steelers fans, and for the Steelers, they punched their ticket in here. I don't think any of us, I know neither of us had them in the playoffs. I think I jokingly entertained it just because I was like, it's gonna happen probably somehow, some way, but I didn't do it seriously. So maybe next year I'll do that for serious and remember this, but probably won't. Anyhow, Steelers handled their business, like we mentioned there. Another team that handled business. Now, this next one was basically kind of a win and end situation between the Houston Texans and the Indianapolis Colts. Texans get the win, 23-19. Got ahead and just kind of hung on there. What were your thoughts here in regards to another team kind of like Pittsburgh, where everyone, including us probably, I know myself for sure, counted out Houston at the beginning of the year. There's no chance they were going to make the playoffs, much less yeah, win the division. And I mean, not only did they punch a ticket to the playoffs here, we'll talk about some of the other stuff later, but they also won that division. So, what were your thoughts on Texans prevailing here?
I mean, a wild game, a wild win. They needed this one big time, especially with the game that we'll talk about later that happened with Jacksonville. They end up winning the division because of this win, and it was a strange game. The Texans themselves had 11 penalties compared to the Colts 3, and usually when you see a difference like that, you're like, wow, they got to lose. But the Texans defense stepped up big, and I want to give them a major shout out because although in general, like even us, we weren't super hyped on the Texans offense because of the weapons and all that kind of stuff. I don't think people were really equally as enthusiastic about the defense. Like it didn't feel like there was a ton of playmakers over there. I mean, you got Will Anderson, you got Derek Stingley, but how well do they perform? And then, the rest of the cast is just kind of, Jalen Petrie and some of these other guys that it didn't feel like they were really known commodities, but this defense played fantastically throughout the year. I mean, they weren't necessarily elite by any means, but they were always solid, and they stepped up in big moments like this game where the Colts were 1 of 11 on third down, and that's just not going to be good enough to ever get you the win. They were also 0 of 1 on fourth down. So the Texans defense on the key money downs, they came up big time, and that was a big reason they were able to overcome the penalty difference. So shout out to the Texans, really good win, and who knows, this could be just the beginning of the CJ Stroud era because in only his rookie year, despite, like we just talked about, all the potential holes that a lot of people felt this roster had, they've won the division, and it feels like things could maybe only go up from here as they start to add even more talent.
And they easily could have used the excuse, the Texans, injuries, because they had half the season, the beginning of the season, especially the offensive line was like all out.
The entire thing. Yeah.
And then you lose Tank Dell a couple weeks ago. So you're like, damn, like he was having a great season. And then Nico Collins was out for a bit too. And even like, hey, I was high. We were both kind of high on Dameon Pierce, and he hasn't had a great season. But luckily, Devin, sorry, I hit my mic, but Devin Singletary, he's been really good filling into. And obviously, Stroud's been amazing. And yeah, you mentioned all those guys kind of stepping up on defense too. It's looking like D'Amico. I have to check again, but a lot of people are saying that he's front runner for Coach of the Year now, and he probably rightfully so because once again we all wrote this team off. In regards to the game itself too, it sucks. It was a good one, and even you mentioned, of course, Colts being terrible on third down. There was obviously that last fourth down that were unfortunately, like, I'm not going to put too much on poor Tyler Goodson. It wasn't the best thrown ball either. It was a little behind him. Sure. That's one where, hey, Gardner, like, these, I know my guy, Chris Sims, he used to say that Gruden would tell him, like, whenever a running back would drop a pass, like, hey, like, they're running backs for a reason. Like, you got to put on the numbers for them. So, and it wasn't the greatest pass, and just unfortunate because it would have been the first down. Who knows? Maybe we're talking about the Colts here instead of the Texans, as being the division winner or such. But
also on that play, like, how do you take out Jonathan Taylor? It's not like Jonathan Taylor is necessarily known for being like a stud receiver, but you're paying the guy top tier money as a running back. Like that, that feels like a play that's kind of inexcusable to take him out on.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's one of those things where maybe Jonathan dropped it a couple times in practice. Like, okay, let's throw in Tyler. Tyler's at least with a better receiver. Maybe, I don't know, or maybe. Like I said, I'm with you. I'm just playing devil's advocate a little bit. Like maybe the fact that they didn't want to be obvious that they were going to Jonathan Taylor in this moment. I don't know.
Sure,
I guess, but it's could be fairly criticized, the decision. I know you're not the only one, and rightfully so, to point that out and have that observation. But hey, once again, like I said, even the Colts, like we expect this Colts team maybe to be here if in 9-8 if all went well with Anthony Richardson, which feels like it was forever ago that he played. So good base that they're building with. We'll see if they can bring him along next year, and what other pieces they may add in offseason free agency. But it was a good kind of resurgence year for them. I'm pretty sure, right? They did not get in. Yeah, right. Yeah, they did not. Oh, they're at the 7th seed. Excuse me.
Wait, who are we talking about?
Indianapolis did not get in because NFL Jesus was wrong. They have not updated their standings. So that was last week.
That game was win in and loser eliminated.
Yeah, I see it now. So they're officially gone. I just want to make sure before I was singing their I forgot the word, their eulogy or whatever. But anyway, Texans win. We'll see more of CJ Stroud and them going forward in the playoffs, which will be fun. I think, regardless for as viewers, and I think it'd be good for obviously that young team. It'll be because like some other teams I'll mention, they get to play with house money in the playoffs. But anyhow, those were the Saturday games. Let's move on over to the games on Sunday. Now, FYI, some of them we may go over kind of quickly because they didn't really matter in terms of anything. This one mattered a bit, not much. Detroit Lions, they take care of business against the Minnesota Vikings, technically eliminating the Vikings. I think the Vikings had a small chance. Nonetheless, Detroit wins 30-20 over the Vikings. Any thoughts here, John?
I mean, this game felt like a momentum win, realistically. Just kind of getting your stride going into the playoffs. It was a good game for Jared Goff through the air. Amon-Ra St. Brown showed out. And honestly, I don't put too much stock into it because the Vikings, a lot of their damage came in the second half after they were kind of already down big. But I'm still worried about the Detroit secondary. Nick Mullins, although he threw 2 interceptions, had almost 400 yards passing, 192 to Justin Jefferson. Now, the Lions aren't necessarily going to have to go against a receiver of Justin Jefferson's caliber unless they are to play like, Dallas or Philly or Miami or some team like that who has one of those other top receivers. But, they are going to have to go against Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. So I don't know. It's just, although this was a solid win, the issues still kind of popped up in this game that I didn't necessarily love to see. So it'll remain to be seen how it affects them in the playoffs. But at the end of the day, they got the win. The game didn't really matter because they're still the third seed, whether they won or lost.
Yeah. I do want to add to tough because they did lose Sam Laporta, who's having a great year, and I think I would definitely say was their second best passing target. So
yeah,
that may be a big thing, especially with the Rams coming in town. They focus on take away Amon-Ra St. Brown. Okay, who else is going to be dependable? And especially if the run game doesn't get going. But once again, good win for the Lions. When we're more projecting ahead, like John was doing, I'm about to do too. Because I want to build off what you mentioned about the Vikings once again being able to throw all over them. Like, I know there's just, and then you got Stafford coming into town, and Kevin O'Connell comes from Sean McVay, so I'm sure McVay is gonna, like you mentioned, gonna look at this. Obviously, Stafford's amazing, and we know that they have technically two number ones right at this point, or they're both playing like two number ones, especially Puka. So yeah, the Lions have to work cut out for them, and we'll see if they can overcome these potential deficiencies or that they've had going into this game to the playoffs. We'll see if they can correct that. Seems unlikely, but it's playoffs. You never know. But they secured the win here. Good for them. Although, once again, you won, but at the cost of losing Sam Laporta. So we'll see if they can overcome that loss in the playoffs. And like I said, we'll talk more about that later and come the picks pod. But good for Lions fans. They can keep celebrating despite the Pistons. But anyhow, let's go on over to the NFC South, where this one was a lot of newsworthy. Now, the result was a blowout. The New Orleans Saints, they blew out the Atlanta Falcons 48-17. Sent Arthur Smith packing because as of today, he was fired. I'll give you, and we all know John, well, myself too, but John's going to speak for all of us here in a minute probably about Arthur Smith being let go. And then there's also the whole thing about Arthur Smith too getting upset because the Saints scored that touchdown at the end, even though Dennis Allen said, hey, and Jameis Winston reinforced it, that, it was a player's decision to kind of run up the score there at the end. So anyhow, John, your thoughts on this game and I guess the situation?
I mean, just for the fourth down thing, like, I get it that, like, you can be upset, but your season just ended, and realistically, all I read out of that was Arthur Smith is taking out his frustrations for probably the fact that he's about to lose his job on Dennis Allen. Like, I don't think he was actually so upset about the play itself that he is out there cursing at another head coach, because if his job was not on the line, that is such an unprofessional thing to do. Even if you think it's unprofessional to fake a kneel, like, it's just wild to go out there and just like start cursing out the coach. So I didn't really love that move, but like I said, I understand it. Emotions are running high because of the situation he's in. So like, I can see why he's very upset. And that said, He got fired. I think it was the right move. This is 2 years in a row where they were in the mix for a playoff spot at the end of the year, and they just weren't able to get it done. And I don't know how many times as an owner you can sit there and, stomach that, because like the division is just so bad that what excuse do we really have for not being able to go out there and win this division when the standard is like 9 wins? I don't know. It just feels like they missed their opportunity a couple times, and this is the result. And I'm not going to talk about the whole Kyle Pitts, Drake London stuff, because we've been over all that. Like we've known that for a long time, right? So nothing new there. But I think it had to happen. I think it's a good change for the organization. We'll see who they can hire next. But yeah, for the Falcons, you had your opportunities, you had a lot of playmakers, and you just simply weren't able to get it done. And despite the fact that they scored that touchdown late, like, let's just be honest, you got embarrassed at the end of the day. So
yeah,
that I don't know what else you want,
Yeah, I mean, you can stop it. That's what I mean. That's what they always say.
Yeah.
And you're like, hey, your team can play defense at some point. I mean, don't forget the teams like the Dolphins and Raiders were running it up earlier this year. So yeah, I mean, it's not like it's the only example of it happening. So completely with you on that. And I'm also interested. I mean, I'm assuming too, and I think I wonder if you're on the same boat. Like, this is it for Desmond Ridder in terms of the starter in Atlanta. Like I'm assuming along with Arthur Smith going like, okay, like we got to get a new quarterback in, because once again, like this they have good meat and potatoes. This team, like we've talked about, they had a really good offensive line. We know that Bijan's great. We mentioned the skill position guys, but even on the flip side, like their defense, I know this game wasn't a shining example, but for the most part of the year, their defense was a pretty solid defense, and they lost a couple pieces, so they overperformed a bit there for the most part. So yeah, this might be a somewhat like desirable job, because hey, maybe you get a quarterback and maybe you can get one kind of cheap. You don't have to spend a first round pick. We'll get into all that, but I mean, there's a couple of quarterbacks that may or may not be on the market, or they may be able to trade up. Who knows? But this will be. I won't be shocked if the Falcons, depending on their hire, are all of a sudden right back into they can probably win the division expectations next year. But just failed to do so.
Especially like. Sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I was about to end it, so go ahead.
I was just going to say, especially if you're like an offensive-minded coach, like outside of maybe the Chargers job, because Justin Herbert is attached to that, I really don't know which job would open up that would be more appealing than being able to coach Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Bijan Robinson, and having like a pick in the top half of the draft. I don't know what pick they exactly have at 7 and 9. I don't think they're top 10.
No.
But it's still like solid that if you're around the 10 to 16 range, then let's say they go trade for Justin Fields, or they go trade for some veteran quarterback. I don't know, maybe they sign Russell Wilson or something. Like, it's obviously an upgrade over Desmond Ridder, all those kind of options. And then you use that other first round pick on maybe a defensive guy, maybe an offensive lineman, maybe another receiver. Like, you don't really need anything else on offense, and the defense was pretty solid too at points this year. Like, they have talent on defense, so I do feel like Atlanta is really in one of those situations where, with some development, with some coaching that really knows how to utilize the pieces they have, and with an upgraded quarterback, like, they could certainly be the best team in this division. And I don't necessarily think that's like that difficult to do, because, like I said, the standard for this division is like 9 wins at this point.
Yeah. So, and also I want to throw out, just in regards to last point on top of that, like I don't know if I only have any major extensions from what I can see, but nonetheless, they're gonna have about $36 million in cap to play with. So yeah, they could get a free agent or two, an impact free. I don't know exactly who's going to be out there, but you never know. They could get a big fish or two to help maybe whatever, fill in some of those holes, or who knows. So they could be very quickly in the conversation that they were in this year. So hopefully next year, with whoever they get, they actually finish the job and utilize their weapons, like all of us have been kind of preaching. But Saints get the win. They don't get in the playoffs though, so unfortunate for them. Some of the other dominoes they needed to fall did not. But good little I guess, end to the season for the Saints. Derek Carr, looked solid towards the end. Obviously, this good little performance to put the cherry on top of your season. Maybe build some momentum going into next season for them. So there is that. And obviously, we'll see who the Falcons hire. So going on to this next game, this one will be relatively quick, I imagine, because there were no implications here. As the Cincinnati Bengals, they beat the Cleveland Browns, pretty much their backups, 31-14. Once again, Bengals, unfortunately, you're not going to in the playoffs. Browns had already locked up their spot, so they're playing their backups. Is there anything you wanted to note here?
Not really. I mean, even the Browns, the Bengals, the only notable thing that I think we saw out of this game was the clear attempt to get some of the younger guys involved. Chase Brown, Charlie Jones, Andre Iosivas, some of these guys. So if you're a Bengals fan, that was probably nice to see. Iosivas got 2 touchdowns. Jones led the team in receiving yards. Because, with the potential departure of T. Higgins, we don't know the future of Joe Mixon, Tyler Boyd. These are guys that could be impact players next year. So, that's really the only notable thing that I thought came out of this game.
I agree. And I will say, just in regards to not just this game, but the end of the season, I think you feel a little bit good that, especially if I'm not sure contract-wise, I'm sure he's locked up a bit. I don't think he'll come out much, but maybe feel better about, okay, we got Jake Browning so that, obviously Bro should come back, but you may have a situation like remember last playoffs where Mahomes had to be out for a drive, and then Chad Henne, just you feel a little bit better about your backup in general going forward. Right. And so other than that, not much else to take from this one. Good confidence win for the Bengals once again to head into the offseason for them. But let's move on to another team that had a really good end to their season because they ruined another team's playoff and division chances, and that was the Tennessee Titans getting, I guess some would say, the big upset over the Jacksonville Jaguars, 28-20. John, it was a vintage day for Derrick Henry and the gang. So, what were your thoughts here in regards to the Titans ruining the Jaguars' playoff chances?
I think not only was this, a game in which they wanted to be the spoiler, but I think there was a little bit of added, revenge based on last year. Because if you remember, the Titans kind of collapsed at the end of the year, where the Jaguars were the one who knocked them out of the playoffs to win the division in that last game.
Josh Dobbs, it was like a scoop and score 2 to ice it.
Yeah, so we get the reverse result here, where obviously the only difference here is the Titans weren't able to punch their ticket to the playoffs. But you could tell this was one where they had some emotional investment in it, because I even saw some clips of the Titans players. So they were saying they're going to have to meet us in Cancun now. So they clearly wanted to get that win. So good for the Titans. And I texted it in our group, man, the Jags, the second half collapse needs to I don't know, but something has to change, because Trevor Lawrence, he got injured, and his play wasn't that great this year. I do think people are overreacting a little bit. I'm starting to see all these posts of, is Trevor Lawrence a bust? Is he a mid-tier quarterback? Sure, he had 14 interceptions, but I feel like some people are kind of overreacting to his season. And I say that because I literally saw my own quarterback, Dak Prescott, kind of do the same thing last year when he had 15 interceptions and everybody declared him the worst quarterback of all time. And then he goes out and he balls out this year and leads the league in passing touchdowns. So anyway, I digress. I think people are freaking out a little bit about Trevor Lawrence because the Jaguars, unfortunately, we thought that they would kind of continue to grow. There's still issues on this team. I've been bringing it up all year, and it plagued them in this game as well. The run game was super inefficient. I think they got to clean up the offensive line, because that was clearly a problem throughout the season, not only in terms of protecting Trevor Lawrence, because there were certain games, I think it was that Falcons game or maybe the Bills one. There's one of those games that I think it was one of the London ones where Trevor Lawrence just got destroyed the entire day. And then it was the Falcons game, where he just couldn't do anything. And then, like I said, ETN only had a handful of games where he was efficient whatsoever. Sure, he had a lot of explosive plays and touchdowns, but almost all the rest of his plays were just 1 or 2 yard carries. So I think the play calling could improve in that regards. And the receivers, I think there was still a lack of chemistry between Calvin Ridley and Trevor Lawrence. Ridley had some drop issues throughout the season. So I don't know. I think the Jags still have a lot of issues. I'm not necessarily giving up and boo-hoo and doom and gloom like a lot of people seem to be right now. but it's certainly disappointing if you're a Jags fan to be 9-8 because they have lost, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of their last 6. That's real rough, man. When you're sitting at, what is that, 8-3, and then they finish out the season 9-8, like that's just got to be a tough pill to swallow that you couldn't win a single one of those games that would have punched your ticket to the playoffs, especially considering like they played the Bengals with Jake Browning immediately after like Joe Burrow got hurt. You played the Browns and you lost by 4. I mean, you lost to the Buccaneers by getting blown out. Like, you lost to a 5-win Titans team, So it sucks for Jaguars.
Isn't
fans.
their only win against Carolina too? I think, right?
Yeah, that was the only one.
Yeah, so it's like, ooh, even then, like your only win was against Carolina. Yeah,
and they weren't that impressive in that game either. Like it was 26-0 on the stat line, but even then, like ETN had like one explosive play, and the rest of the game it was just kind of Carolina making mistakes.
Yeah, to add on what you mentioned about inefficiency in the run game, and we mentioned this at the beginning of the year, like it was like if there was something that was going to hold back the Jaguars, at least going into the year, it looked like it was going to be their offensive line because we mentioned losing Juwan Taylor, and then they didn't have Cam Robinson for half the year, and it's never easy just to come back in, halfway into especially at left tackle or tackle in general. And yeah, I think that was obviously a big reason why they started. I mean, you saw it at the trade deadline. They traded for a guard from the Vikings, Ezra Cleveland, and even then it didn't really, elevate their offensive line that well. And it obviously affected Lawrence just health wise and probably going through his developments and such. So yeah, it was just a ripple effect from that. And I'm also not overreacting like you in regards to Trevor Lawrence and his offense or him in general, but so if anything I would kind of criticize mostly would be, hey, Doug Peterson, we've seen this fixture before. It happened in Philadelphia after, yes, they won the championship that year, but then the next 2 years were real tough. Yeah, we saw it's very similar things where it's just harder for them to generate big plays. It's just a run game. So I'll be interested to see if maybe Frank Reich, he got let go. Maybe he brings him back because that was kind of the secret sauce to when he won the Super Bowl there. So maybe that can help them out for Jacksonville here. So, and also want to throw out too, Jacksonville's defense a little concerning too, the way they ended the year. Because that's a little bit less though, because we know they have some young pieces, and they're still kind of trying to get all that together. So, very, very tough way to end the season for them. And for Titans fans, maybe good to see Derrick Henry in his potential last game as a Titan, have a vintage performance. Even Tannehill wasn't too bad either, as we expect both of them to be gone. And also shout out for D-Hop, because I think he got his incentive, at least reception. I forget what incentive it actually was, but he's also playing for an incentive. I saw like 5 posts of that, so pretty sure he hit it. If not, I'm sure he'll be fine. And I'm sure the rest of the Titans will be fine, knowing, like you said, they will be seeing some of those Jaguars in Cancun and know that they're the reason that they're there. So tough loss, tough end of the season for the Jacksonville Jaguars there. But kind of is what it is. This next game, going to breeze over this one. LA Rams led by Carson Wentz and with Puka Nacua for the first half or however long it took for him to reach, to break those records that he broke. Kudos to him. They beat the San Francisco 49ers, which with mostly their backups too, 21-20. Any thoughts or comments here, John?
Not really. I mean, it was the show of the backups. Like Puka was kind of the only notable player that played. I don't know. I mean, like the game, I guess, depending on what the Rams wanted in terms of seeding, which clearly I don't think they were that pressed about it since they benched everybody. If they really did want that 6th seed, I don't think they would have done it. But it helps them because the fact that they won made sure they got the matchup with the Lions as opposed to the Cowboys. Like I said, the fact that they benched people to me indicates they didn't really care who they played. So I don't really have any thoughts on the game considering that.
Yeah. So I don't have really much else to add either, other than kudos to Puka Nacua, obviously, for breaking those records. Although I think once again, I do think it's interesting because I always post the other Calvin Johnson, all those other records, and hey Matthew, let's give a little love to Mr. Matthew Stafford. I think it's a good reason as to why those guys got those records, and but at the end of the day, because once again, I remember I got a little bit of criticism for I put Stafford last year, which or going into this year in the rankings, and he's looked pretty good. Obviously, now that he's had a little protection, but we'll see what they do in the playoffs. Going up next, this one also we'll probably want to go over quickly because this not much happened here, as it was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers getting the win over the Carolina Panthers. I mean, no surprise there. A little bit surprised though was that it was only 9-0, so maybe a little bit less of a blowout than many would have anticipated. But any thoughts here in regards to the Bucs taking care of business and punching their ticket into the playoffs?
I mean, they got it done, but it was an ugly game. I hope that nobody watched this game because a 9-0 game is not entertaining. I didn't watch a single bit of this game at all.
Okay, so you don't know that you may not know too that about the CD thing happened to DJ Chark where fumbled out of the end zone because he got punched out. Granted.
Well,
But granted,
you know
I don't think he was
rule.
extending, but that's what I mentioned. I just wanted to throw it out there. So there you go. If you're
Well, unfortunate for Carolina. I mean, it's especially because they don't control their own pick, but I guess it helps them getting the second overall pick. But regardless, the second round pick.
Actually, if I remember correctly, I'll double check this in a second. I think they also, if I read correctly before, they also gave up their second round pick this year. They have no pick until the third.
Oh, okay. So that doesn't surprise me that they probably gave that to Chicago too. Which once again, that trade was just rough. But I mean, yeah. So I don't really have any thoughts on this one. Good for Tampa Bay. 3 years in a row, actually, they've won the division title.
Yeah.
And 2 years in a row, they've been the fourth seed and have not really necessarily been that competitive of a team in terms of like the grand scheme of the playoffs. But you never know because they are going to be playing the Eagles, who we'll talk about later. So who knows what the Buccaneers are capable of. So yeah, good win for the Bucs. They handled their business like they needed to.
Yeah, so we'll see them more in the playoffs. And yeah, Carolina, poor Carolina. Feel for those fans, but not the owner. Screw him. Anyway, anyhow, let's go on over to this next game, which also is pretty forgettable, except for one minute detail, as it was the New York Jets. They get the win in New England. Bill Belichick's possible and likely last game as head coach of the Patriots. They beat Jets win 17-3. Not much to talk about game wise. I mean, Breece Hall, vintage Breece, I guess not vintage, only second year, but looking like the Breece Hall that we all know and love. In case you weren't already convinced, this game probably should have convinced you, as he had a monster game, 178 yards on the ground and a touchdown. Any thoughts here, John, in regards to this one?
Obviously, the Patriots lose. It's good for them in terms of draft position. The Jets get the win. Good for them. Bailey Zappi, once again, 2 interceptions. It's all but guaranteed the Patriots will probably be taking a quarterback in the first round. I don't think Bill Belichick's gone at this point. He came out today and said that he's willing to relinquish basically the GM role, the personnel authority. So to me, that indicates that if he's willing to sacrifice roles moving forward, that he wants to stay. Because I don't feel like he would be saying that if he just wanted to leave entirely.
Gotcha.
I could be wrong on that. I don't know.
I heard
Bill Belichick is an enigma. So
they're talking about PFT, where they mentioned that too, but it's still it just feels like maybe he's just digging in. I don't know, but I think personally that they move. I think you got to move on. Just clean slate for both sides. Maybe Bill, hey, best. I would be shocked if they release this as a mutual parting of ways, just to make it look better. That hey, we both walked away, even though I just feel like give Bill a little proper respect for all the things he's done, of course, because amazing coach. But I think it's just time to get new quarterback, new chapter. It just hasn't worked out really in any sense. The past couple of years have been pretty poor. I mean, except for obviously the defense and on the field, especially on the defense on the field, but the offense definitely fallen off. And I don't know. I just feel like Bill's just playing coy, and probably already looking at his next job, or trying to poke around, see who's interested. Probably call up Josh McDaniels, say, hey Josh, come run the offense for me. I don't know, because Josh McDaniels is also unemployed at the moment. So I've been interested to see what happens. Of course, that's one of those teams we mentioned where just keep an eye, because it could be any day where they may give him his walking papers, or like John said, maybe they do Robert Kraft sticks it out with him. But hey, we're gonna have a different GM. You're not in charge of drafting players because you've kind of sucked at it the past few years. So, not kind of.
Well, question for you about this whole thing. As a Spurs fan, did you think they should have fired Pop over the last few years?
No, but I think the difference is like NBA is different because like we weren't. Obviously, the number 2 thing happened. If you don't know what number 2 is, it's Kawhi Leonard.
Sure.
That thing happened. That definitely set us back, and we lost that trade. That was going to happen.
Sure.
And unfortunately, with Aldridge also like right afterwards. So I think those caveats, and then like the fact that we were able to lean into a rebuild kind of quickly. I think that's what like I wasn't gunning for Pops. I wasn't on that train just because I was like no like. We're on the right path here. Like we had to hit a reset. It just happened. And also like while we were hitting the reset, it's not like the Patriots where Pop was like so insistent on trying to still be a playoff team. And, it's not like trying to get the only egregious one maybe was Pau Gasol, but we got out of that, little contract anyway, because it wasn't even that bad. So yeah, that one, I think just because it's a different sport too. So I guess, it's harder to mess up that
they're not totally comparable,
but it is kind of similar in terms of like legacy because you're right. I heard whispers, people talking about them potentially letting Pop go.
Right. I mean, the only reason I bring it up is just because I don't know. If I was an owner, I don't think I could have the gut to fire Bill Belichick. Like the guy brought us 6 Super Bowls, and like obviously. Sure, like the whole Mac Jones thing didn't work out, but if he's willing to relinquish like the personnel authority, that's kind of like been personally my biggest gripe with them is that kind of stuff. But like they were competitive against the Bills both times they played him, including beating them. And it just feels like with a new quarterback, who knows? Maybe you could figure it out because although they don't have like the top pick, I think they're like what 3rd or 4th.
I think I saw in a mock they're 4th. Yeah.
So and in that top 4. I'm pretty sure it's almost guaranteed that Washington's taking a quarterback, but I think Arizona would be 3 in that case. And so I don't think Arizona's taking a quarterback. Everything that they've indicated is that Kyler is their guy. So at most 2 QBs I think are getting picked above them, maybe only 1. But if Chicago's not going to take one, I think they would trade it. So a team would be trading up for a quarterback. But who knows? Maybe they could trade up for the quarterback. Maybe they could just get their guy. I just think with the Mac Jones thing, like, they got the last QB of that 5. Like there was 5 that everybody thought were first round. Well, we didn't necessarily think Trey Lance was first round quality, but we knew he was going to go first round. Yeah. And so they got the last of the pick. Like they could have traded up to maybe get somebody else, but like all the other quarterbacks were off the board by the time they picked, and they took Mac, and it didn't work unfortunately. But I think that once again, I also personally believe that stems to a lot of the other issues that the roster construction had. So. I think in terms of like just being a coach, I still think Bill Belichick is a good coach. And I think that, I don't know, it just seems like because Tom Brady won a Super Bowl with the Buccaneers, that it feels like it maybe sped up the timeline a little bit more for Bill. Yeah. That it just because the fact that they can get a new QB, I'd give him another chance. And then if it doesn't work after that, then like, yeah, maybe it's time to retire. But I don't know. I don't think if I was Robert Kraft, I could personally do it.
I understand. Yeah. And honestly, like you're saying makes a lot of sense, especially if maybe like, hey, Bill's like, hey, like I'm bringing back in Josh. We all know, like you remember Robert,
and that's
Josh is a good OC.
I think they 100% should. I think they should.
And then he'll be like, yeah, so that should be good. Then yeah, and then like you hire your own GM, or we got this guy that we think should be the GM, and maybe I don't know. Yeah. So, I'm interested to see what decisions they have to make. But yeah, I do agree with you in regards to the timeline stuff. It's just. Unfortunate, like Brady winning the Super Bowl. People forget he went to a really good Bucs team. Like the team had pretty good talent, and just was kind of missing a good cornerback. And that unfortunately sped up timeline because how people have turned on Bill.
And I will say too, I feel like people kind of ignore like what happened to the Patriots roster apart from Tom Brady because of Tom Brady. Like Gronk retires, Stephon Gilmore was dealing with injuries, and he eventually leaves and like has to get traded and goes to it was like the Panthers and then the Colts and now the Cowboys. So like he was gone, but like even while he was still there, he wasn't fully healthy. The receiving core of all the guys they had, like Edelman, he retires. Like they had it was more than just Tom Brady,
Yeah.
And then Donta Hightower was dealing with the injuries, and I think he's like retired now or something. And he was like the key to their defense for so long. The McCourty twins retire.
They were very key in the back end. They're
it just seems like although I am very critical of the way that Bill has tried to replenish the talent to replace those guys, a lot of the like key guys they had, not only Tom Brady, are gone, and I think I don't agree with the strategy he tried immediately, which was when they signed all those huge free agents. Like they paid huge money to Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. Like I've seen so many articles about like the teams who spend the most money in free agency and just how like almost always those things never work out. And so I was never a big fan of that. But I think him giving up the duties, I don't know. It feels like a good move to me. And like you said, if they bring back McDaniels, if they can get the right quarterback in the draft, then who knows? I still believe Bill might have some left in the tank.
Yeah, so we'll see. And it'll be interesting to see too. You mentioned a little bit what happens with Mac Jones.
Yeah,
because who knows?
I think he's done.
Oh, I assume he's done in New England. But like, can they salvage any sort of value for them? Like, it's just been to see where the chips fall. Because like we talk about Atlanta, hey, maybe Atlanta. I don't know. Maybe Atlanta takes a shot at him for like a third. I don't know. I don't know what his value would be.
Atlanta, please don't.
For like a third round. I'm just saying it feels like an Atlanta. I don't know who they're hired.
Yeah.
It just feels like going to be an Atlanta thing to be like, hey, like third rounder or like, yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
Right. No, I get what you're saying.
See where the chips fall. But yes, Patriots. I'm not sure if they have to flip coins because of like records or stuff. But yeah, as of NFL.com, they are the pick number 3 in the draft. So they should be prime.
Oh, they're 3.
They are 3 as Commanders.
I mean, that's
them 3.
That's even better for them then, because that means at worst, like there's 2 quarterbacks taken above them, they can get their pick of the third guy. So
yeah, or maybe it'd be easier to jump to number 1 since you're only
trade up. Yeah.
You're only moving up 2 spots and they only drop it down 2 spots. So it's like, yeah, we'll see.
And actually, now that's actually huge, because if Chicago's going to trade back and they maybe want Marvin Harrison, getting above the Cardinals could get them Marvin Harrison while still trading back.
I think acquiring a couple assets, probably like, I don't know, future first, future second. So I don't know what.
So exactly that's actually pretty big, because if they were 4 and Cardinals were 3, then that Marvin Harrison factor maybe is a little bit more worrisome.
Yeah, so we'll see. We'll see. We know the first 18 picks, so we'll see how the rest of the chips fall. But yeah, Patriots looking good, at least in regards to draft position. So yeah, maybe tip your hat to Bill. Maybe he knew what he was doing this year. Anyhow, let's move on over from that one. We mentioned the Cardinals. Let's go to them as they almost pull off the upset. Some may scratch their chin and squint their eyes a little bit and wonder if the fix was in, because Prater had that amazing streak of game-winning field goals. This was about a 40-yarder he had to potentially win it. Missed it, so who knows? Because of that, the Seahawks win 21-20. Unfortunately, Packers did not lose. We'll talk about that later. But they had to win to at least have a chance to get in. But any thoughts here in regards to Seattle escaping with the win?
I mean, it was a good win for Seattle. They did what they had to do in order to, potentially get in. It's just unfortunate the chips didn't fall their way. I think that they're probably going to really look back and kick themselves in the foot for that Rams game, where even despite the fact that Geno Smith went out, they're probably upset that he went out in the first place, and we're hoping that maybe he could stay healthy. The one where they lost by 1, but even without him going out, they certainly had their chance. So that's the one they're probably going to regret looking back on it. But for the Cardinals, I thought this was a good game for them. Like all the pieces that I think you wanted to see do well, did well. Kyler Murray had a great game, and so, it just reestablishes that you're very confident in him as your quarterback moving forward. Michael Wilson had a really solid performance, so you got that factor in there. And James Conner, this second half surge that he's had has been really impressive. So I don't know his contract situation, but maybe this instills faith in them to continue with him as the running back for them. So I think both teams kind of got the result they wanted. The Seahawks obviously wanted the chance at the playoffs. Arizona, they want to kind of figure out who they got, who they want to continue to build around. And although I don't think they were trying to lose, Matt Prater, he missed, I don't know about all that, but losing did benefit them. So both teams kind of got what they wanted.
Yeah.
Even though it didn't unfortunately work for Seattle.
So they could potentially let him go, but he has 1 year left in his contract, James Conner. So gotcha. Next year. So they could maybe actually work out really well for both sides if, maybe Carolina or Arizona, gets the best of his prime. But yeah, I did like what you mentioned in regards to Arizona, seeming like they got the pieces. And I think They've already committed Kyler, which I agree with. Hey, let's build out the rest of the roster a little bit more too. And let's just insert, like we see with Carolina, like, oh, let's just go get our guy and trade away all our future assets and hope that he can carry the team, even though the team's less than. Then Trey McBride, just a lot of good pieces there. Defense has had its moments, even though I wasn't very talented, except for Buda Baker, really. But I obviously expect that defense to add more talent there, and fill out the rest of the roster on offense. And we're both assuming, unless maybe Chicago finagles their way within the top three, that they'll be after Marvin Harrison Jr. or maybe the lineman. We'll talk more about that come draft time. I do want to mention though for Seattle, I'd be very interested to see if they change something offensive personnel wise, coaching staff, because once again, we talked about their offense is just too talented to have DK Metcalf go for one reception for 10 yards and only 6 targets. And same with their first round pick, Jackson Smith-Njigba, who had moments but never really got consistently going. And especially that pass offense should be better, and I don't think that's fully on Geno. That's partially on, like you mentioned before, just general creativity and tying things together. Maybe they need to address and add more talent in the interior offensive line. That would probably help too. Just a little disappointing that Seattle, like you mentioned, they had their opportunities where they didn't have to be in this position, but they kind of blew it in certain aspects. We were week one. I know it wasn't. Looking back, it's not a surprise, but the Rams got them out of the gate, really put them behind the 8 ball. So, some tough losses early in the season. Every game matters. Obviously, cost the Seahawks here as they get the win, unfortunately, but they will be headed home to Cancun for the rest of the next few months, of course. So, good win for the Cardinals to build confidence going into the next season. Let's move on over. This one will be very short and brief as well, as the Kansas City Chiefs, they get the win over the LA Chargers, although it was the Chiefs backups plus Chris Jones because he got his sack to get his million, so good for him. But Chiefs win 13-12. Any thoughts here, John?
The Chiefs got their win. Good for them. I don't really have any other thoughts.
Yeah, there wasn't any other thoughts. I'd be interested to see, maybe we got a little, maybe Nicole Hardman kind of got to be featured, so maybe that's building confidence for him going to the playoffs. Just something to know. I'm not saying that will happen, but otherwise, very interesting to see this offseason for LA. Obviously, they have to, for the Chargers, LA Chargers, obviously have to fill in the head coach role. Who do they get? Who are they going after? And from a lot of buzz is that they may have to let go of a Joey Bosa and or Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack had a really good season statistically, so some tough decisions to make there. And then obviously you may have to address offensive line as well, because Corey Linsley looking like he will have to retire due to heart issues. So, and he's been a really damn good center for them. So, granted, he did miss most of the season, so maybe they feel good about whoever replaced him, but we'll see what moves they make. But in regards to the game itself, it didn't really matter. So not really going to talk about it. Sorry, Chargers and Chiefs fans, but nothing real noteworthy either to mention.
The Chargers fans probably wanted to lose, so they got the result they cared about.
Yeah, they're like, okay, we'll take that. Yeah. Anyhow, let's keep it in the AFC West. Another quote-unquote meaningless game, so we'll go right past it as fast as we can. Las Vegas Raiders, they beat the Denver Broncos 27-14. Once again, especially for the Raiders, they're still playing a little for pride. It's Tay and everyone's still out there. Broncos, another game with Jarrett Stidham. Any thoughts here, John?
Also, not a ton of thoughts on this game. Yeah. Just one that didn't really mean a whole lot. So it is what it is. I will say for the Raiders, at least, this game maybe is important just because similar to some of the Bengals game I talked about, young guys making plays, Trey Tucker, Zamir White, some of these kind of guys that were getting involved, and maybe even Aiden O'Connell. We don't know the status of what they're going to do with Jimmy Garoppolo. We don't know if the Raiders are going to maybe target quarterback in the offseason. We don't even know who the head coach is going to be. But I will say the way that the Raiders have ended the year, I wouldn't be surprised. And now I'm blanking on their interim coach's name.
Antonio Pierce, because I did it earlier.
Antonio Pierce. I wouldn't be surprised if, maybe they give him a real good look, because to end the year here, they've won 3 out of their last 4, and the only loss there was against the Colts by 3. And then even before that, they lost to the Vikings by 3. Now, that was a 3-0 game, so it was kind of embarrassing. But they've been competitive to end the season. And even during like some of the earlier parts when he kind of took over, they beat the Giants, they beat the Jets. Like, it hasn't been terrible, is all I'll say, under him. I mean, they were good enough that they almost had a chance to make the playoffs. So
yeah, and he's like maybe one of those guys like a Robert Saleh, where you can obviously tell like the players love him too. So that could be an important aspect in regards to, but ultimately just be interesting what they do decision wise. Because like they probably want to upgrade a quarterback, but man, you guys still got to upgrade a couple other positions. Just feels like that inevitable like middle ground that the Raiders and many other franchises, not just the Raiders, but I feel like the Raiders have been kind of stuck in, where like either some years you had the Derek Carr year where like, oh man, we were really good, and then obviously injury happened, and then after that like you go back to kind of being mid. So we'll see if they can kind of break that cycle. Same for the Broncos. Yeah, we'll see what decisions they make at quarterback with Russell Wilson and such. As we all know what's going to happen or what could happen. Just going to wait and see. If they do let him go, and what direction they'll take as well. But both those teams. Well, Vegas maybe they're probably staying in Vegas. Most of those people, understandably so. While Denver, they are headed back home / Cancun as well. But let's move on over to one of the shockers of the day on Sunday, and that was, and it was to your delight, and probably many others, as the New York Giants pull off an upset over the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles played their starters for the first half, and man, the Eagles also not only lost this game but lost some key pieces too, got banged up. But anyway, Giants win 27-10 over Philadelphia. Mariota came in kind of in the second half because I guess they threw in the towel at that point, down 24-0. But what were your thoughts here, John, in regards to the Giants getting the big upset?
Well, in this game, not only did they lose, but Jalen Hurts got a little bit banged up, and I believe A.J. Brown did too. So I'm pretty sure they're going to be fine because it didn't sound like it was any major injuries, but just something to note for the playoffs.
And they did lose their safety, Sidney Brown, to ACL, though. So an already completed secondary.
And he was one of the few bright spots as of late with that pick six against the Cardinals. That said, about the Eagles as a whole, they're frauds. They're frauds. They've shown themselves the way that they've conducted the season to end the year here. They got blown out by the Niners. They got blown out by the Cowboys. They lost to the Seahawks with Drew Lock. They narrowly beat the Giants the first time they played them. They lose to the Cardinals, and then they just got blown out by the Giants just 2 weeks after beating them. And even before that stretch, which for the record, they just lost 5 of their last 6 games. All the stats of they're the first 10-1 team to finish the season with 6 losses, all that kind of stuff. Eerily similar to that Pittsburgh Steelers team that we've talked about. That they were, we were new to the pod back then, where they were 12-0. It was 3 years ago. They were 12-0. And then they proceeded to lose every single game except for one, I'm pretty sure, including their playoff game. Yeah. They got embarrassed by the Browns. And so
Browns with half their coaching staff out with COVID. Because that was
time. So we'll see if Tampa embarrasses Philly in this wild card matchup. But I don't know how anyone can have any faith in the Eagles right now. How do you lose? How do you narrowly lose to the Giants and then lose to the Cardinals and then lose to the Giants the second time you play them? The Niners and Cowboys game's excusable. The Seahawks at that point, they're a solid team. They had almost beat Dallas the week before. So they were kind of competitive. So sure, maybe. But the Cardinals and Giants losses are completely inexcusable, especially considering what was on the line, where they controlled their own fate with the division, and they lose to 2 of the worst teams in the league. You just can't do that at the end of the year. And even before that stretch of losing 5 out of the last 6, they had 3 games in which they beat the Buffalo Bills by 3 in overtime. Mm-hmm. They beat the Chiefs by 4.
Took a comeback on that one.
Somewhat, it was kind of a controversial game too. I remember there was some potential stuff with the refs and all that. And then they beat the Cowboys by 5 at home, and that was the game where Schoonmaker went down on the half-yard line. Dak was just barely out of bounds on the 2-point conversion play. So Dallas kind of shot themselves in the foot in that game where they should have won that one too. So before this stretch where they lost 5 of their last 6, They very well could have lost all 3 of those games. And if you want to go even before that, they beat the Commanders by a touchdown. Like throughout the year, the Eagles they've been bad. They lost to the Jets. They went to overtime against the Commanders the first time they played them. They just have not been good. They've not been good. They beat the Vikings by 6 points. They beat the Patriots by 5 points. Like the only games in which Philly was actually good this year was the first time they played the Buccaneers. So they're about to play them the second time. That was week 3. They beat them 25-11. The Rams game 23-14. But even that, like the Rams were largely competitive, and that was, I don't know if Kyron Williams was out by that point.
Playing at that point. Yeah, or maybe he was out during that time.
So I don't think he was playing. And then the Dolphins win. Like the Dolphins one, I'll actually give them credit for. That was like the best game they had all year, in my opinion. But they have not been good. They've been pretty bad. Their point differential is pretty bad. And I don't know. I think that there needs to be a hard look in the mirror about a lot of things with the Eagles. Not only in terms of some of the talent, because this could be the last year for Fletcher Cox, for Brandon Graham, for Jason Kelsey, and these are 3 like guys who have been foundational pieces of your team for a decade. Now, on the defensive line, I don't have any concerns about the Fletcher Cox thing because they got Jordan Davis, they got
Jalen Carter.
Why am I blanking on his name? Jalen Carter. Yeah, and you and I were both super high on both of them. Yeah. We thought they were studs.
It's such a perfect tandem too, because like Davis is more of a clogger. Exactly. Carter can be more of your finesse type,
right?
Even though he's strong as hell.
And even with Brandon Graham potentially retiring, like they drafted Nolan Smith, he didn't really do much this year, but he could maybe develop into like the replacement for there. You still have Hassan Reddick,
Josh Sweat's still good
have
too. By
Josh
the way.
Sweat,
so you have 3 still good,
like,
viable pass rushers. Sorry,
right. But the concern maybe is on the offensive line because that's kind of been a key for you. Now they did draft, was it Landon Dickerson, and I can't remember the other guy's name, but they're their 2 guards now.
Jurgens or Jurgens? I forget if the J soft or Y. But yeah.
Yeah, Cam Jurgens it might be Jurgens, but I'm gonna say Jurgens. They drafted them. Those are the 2 starting guards because of some of the unfortunate stuff that happened with some of the previous guards. Was it Brandon Brooks? I think was his name. Was that right guard?
Yeah.
And he retired. So I don't know. And Jason Kelsey's just been so key for that offense. The offense was not very good this year. And I think they need to take a look at the team as a whole if they do get eliminated to this Tampa Bay team. Now, I'm not ruling them out for making maybe a surprise run, but I certainly would be pretty shocked if they were able to pull it off considering the state of the way they played. I think they could maybe beat the Buccaneers, but after that, I really do not expect them to beat Dallas or San Francisco on the road. So yeah, I've already seen Eagles fans start like calling for the heads of the coaching staff because you lose Shane Steichen, you lose Jonathan Gannon. I think both the defense and offense regressed this year, in my opinion, and that's backed up statistically. And you got to wonder, Sirianni, he did a lot of talking, but he did not back it up at all this year in terms of their ability to adjust, their ability to learn from their mistakes, and their ability to like really string together good games.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, you saw that too. Like, there's a much more sloppier team in general. Like you mentioned, statistically, like turnovers were a huge issue this year, and like we mentioned it. Hey, Jalen Hurts was also one of the leaders in turnovers at one point. Probably still up there. I haven't looked at that statistic in a bit, but probably still up there with Josh Allen, even though everyone wants to trash Josh Allen. And yeah, I mentioned throughout the season too, like like you mentioned, like schematically, they're worse than last year. That's part of the reason why we're seeing, like, yes, they have one of the more talented teams still on paper, but when you don't put your guys in winning positions, or like you mentioned, adjust or have counter strategies, things like that, like it's tough in the NFL to win games. And it felt like a lot of that got taken away with those 2, Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon leaving. And they weren't able to replace that. We talked about it before. It had to happen. We just talked about the Patriots. It kind of happened. Obviously, happened with them very quickly and such. So it's one of the tough things about winning and staying a competitive team is you still have. We see it with the Niners for the most part. They've been able. Granted, it helps that Kyle basically already calls and designs play. So that's all. Offense is taken care of. It doesn't really matter who technically the OC is if he even appoints one. And then defensive coordinator, though, they've been able to, cycle like Robert Saleh. Okay, he leaves. And then D'Amico Ryan steps up and, oh, man, he's great. And then he leaves. And then now, they bring in Steve Wilkes. So, we'll have to see I'm assuming they're going to change things up because like they already tried to change up defensive coordinator with, they midway through they changed it to like Matt Patricia. I highly doubt they keep him around. Not that I don't believe in Matt Patricia, but you still got to get a new face maybe. And then I wouldn't. Regardless of what happens, let's make some sort of miracle win. Which, by the way, I'm with you. I don't think that they turn this around overnight. Maybe one win, but not overnight. I would expect for them also to be probably I'll be shocked if they hire someone to be their offensive coordinator. Maybe more established. Like once again, maybe bring back Frank Reich to Philadelphia. He's the only one that really pops in my mind right now, but I'm sure there'll be others that may be out there. So.
I was going to add too that actually the situation maybe is even a little bit more dire than I was thinking about retiring players, because we don't know the future of Darius Slay and James Bradbury. Sure. And like I said, I've said this for the last 2 seasons. I don't necessarily think they're as good as a lot of people give them credit for. And I was a big fan of Darius Slay when he was in Detroit. And I think that he had good, solid seasons, specifically his first year in Philadelphia. I thought he was still elite. But I do think that like they could, who knows what their future holds. Kevin Byard is not getting any younger. Not necessarily that these 3 are going to retire, but like, do they keep them? Do they move on? Like, I don't know. I just feel like Philly's just in this really weird spot where they have to reevaluate a lot of things, especially if they lose that game. Just on the turnover thing too, Jalen Hurts was 4th in the entire league in turnovers. He had 20 on the season. He was only behind Sam Howell, Josh Allen, and Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, so hey, we know we just talked about Trevor. Everyone, flaming him. We know Josh Allen's been under fire, and we'll talk about him later. But yeah, and obviously Sam Howell's. Everyone's like, okay, he's done. He's out. So once again, yeah, he's in like this is a conversation. We're all going to criticize those 3. Let's throw a little bit of criticism maybe towards Hurts or at least this offense. So, and I know Hurts has been a little banged up and such, but. Like I think we alluded to, especially in our rankings, we got a lot of heat in our rankings. We were trying to tell people like, hey, like he's good. He's really good. But like it helps when you have all these other and things are going good, all these other pieces. And now we're seeing this year is a little, they're like you said, they're a little more simple. Now it's more on you, Jalen, to make the plays or makes throws happen. And hey, they're still 11-win team, but like we've been kind of mentioning, they're sputtering at this point. And yeah, I would honestly, out of all the playoff, especially the double-digit win playoff teams, I would say like they're probably on the bottom for me right now in terms of like who I feel like who I'm thinking can go all the way, like we mentioned. So, yeah. So we'll see.
Also, I just want to say too that like, not only with the whole is the scheme more simplistic, but we just talked about all those players that might leave. Like Jalen Hurts is the biggest contract in NFL history.
Yeah.
So it's only a matter of time until people are going to have to leave. And it might start with a lot of these guys retiring, but yeah, like it's just kind of the reality of the situation.
So we'll see, what they do. Obviously Giants have some decisions to make this offseason. We'll see if they go offensive line again or maybe go quarterback or whatever. So we'll see what they do going forward. But let's move on over, staying in your division as your Cowboys. They handle their business, unlike the Eagles, and they end up being the division winner too, as of the result of their 38-10 win over the Washington Commanders. Any thoughts, comments in regards to this one?
Not really. I mean, Cowboys, I expected them to blow out Washington. They do. Good for them. CeeDee Lamb leads the league in receptions. He got 135 catches this year. Guy is a baller. Like I said, I've said this before this week, but I think he's a top 3 receiver in the NFL right now. Only guys I would say are better. Once again, Tyreek Hill, arguably Justin Jefferson, but he was injured on the whole year, so we don't really know. But other than that, I mean, like, yeah, Dallas handled their business. They did what they need to do. They're now the 2nd seed, and I don't know. I don't want to speak too soon because obviously San Francisco is still the prime problem that Dallas has, but this is certainly the most confident I've probably ever felt in a Cowboys team in terms of their ability to maybe go to the Super Bowl, just because the path feels a lot more clear with them being at the 2 seed. Like the only time they'll have to go play San Francisco is in a potential conference championship. And I mean, that'll be farther than I've ever seen them get in my entire life. So just getting there, I think would be cool.
Gotcha. Yeah, we'll talk more about that, right. The stat. Well, not that, like about playoff, or playoff
right.
matchup later.
Next episode.
We'll save it for that fun stuff. But yeah, in regards to the Dallas, I will say it's nice that y'all are established. I like a little more patience with the run game, not just with Pollard, like Dowdle too, because think balance is going to be key in the playoffs. Being able to win in different ways. And yeah, I mean, you took care of business. It wasn't necessarily pretty in the first half, but it's not like y'all were shooting yourselves in the foot like some other teams were and such. I mean, you had the one turnover, but other than that, I mean, Dallas, you handled your business there and got the job done in convincing fashion too. Because I was worried, like I said, after the first half, I was like, "Ooh, are they going to cover?" And luckily, yeah, the last kind of drive to end the half, and then y'all just piled on with the touchdown opening the second half, and then GG's from there. So,
and that was at least good momentum. Cause,
yes,
I don't know, maybe like I have been sometimes worried under the McCarthy era about their ability to adjust in the second half. It's Washington, so I'm not going to sit here and act like it was some amazing team, but just at least showing the ability to do that is nice right before the playoffs.
Yes. So, and yeah, like I said, that'll all be key going forward. And yeah, we'll see what happens to Washington. They've already let go of Ron Rivera, so getting a head start on the head coaching there. Apparently, they're looking at Raheem Morris of the Rams, but I'm sure they're
bringing in Bob Myers, Warriors old president, to help with the search.
Okay, I wasn't sure if I should save the Bass so because like, listen, I understand Bob Myers executive. But I'm like, how does he help with your search for a football
yeah, I don't know.
I'm just saying, like, I know credit to him, they got the Warriors, but also he's the same guy that said the Warriors were light years ahead, but now they're not looking so good.
They're not.
I'm just saying, yeah. I know
all those youngins that were supposed to continue the dynasty post Steph Curry. Well, Jordan Poole's gone. James Wiseman didn't pan out. Kuminga's apparently upset with Steve Kerr. Like
Moses Moody,
it's not looking pretty anymore.
Unfortunately, we'll see. And then, we'll see. Anyway, but we'll save the most of that talk for basketball, which we are going to do next week, by the way, or maybe even this week. Sorry, because I forget that we have the pick, so we'll probably try to do this week. Anyhow, Banders, like I said, we'll see what happens with them, and I guess whatever Bob Myers is going to tell them to do or help consult with, we'll see what they do. And don't forget Magic Johnson's there too, so maybe that's where the connection is, So, anyhow, let's go on to the last afternoon game of Sunday, where my Green Bay Packers, we punched our ticket into the playoffs, beating the Chicago Bears 17-9. So kind of a old school kind of type Packers Bears score there. Although, in my opinion, not in my opinion, I just feel like could have been worse, the game, because an offense really could do, for the most part, whatever we wanted. I mean, end of the half, probably should have had 3, but the clock ran out, and how many timeouts. Kudos to the Bears there. And then there was another drive where we were driving, and then Jordan Love got kind of stripped on a run, and Bears scooped it up. Kudos to the Bears there. But yeah, my Packers, even though I highly doubt it, especially at one point in the season, and the season hot, and we punch our ticket into the playoffs. So any thoughts here, John?
Another team that handles their business. And once again, I know that like some of the matchups, like the Bears aren't necessarily viewed as one of the greatest teams, but we talked about it last episode when I actually picked the Bears to win the game, or at least cover. I can't remember what the spread was, but I thought the Bears honestly were going to win the game. That they've been no slouch. They've finished the season really strong, and so I still thought this was a good result from Green Bay. Like you're talking about with the offense, that was a problem, only 17 points. But I was impressed by the defense because, to me, I'm actually not as worried about the Green Bay offense in the playoffs. Like, you got the playmakers, you got the young guys. Like, I don't have the highest expectations also, so that might be part of it. But I've been pretty worried about the defense because I don't know when this was, but I remember like when I went on that kind of rant about like Desmond Ritter's best game of the season was against Green Bay. Mm-hmm. Bryce Young's best game of the season was against Green Bay. Like, all these bad quarterbacks were having great games against this defense. And Justin Fields has been red hot. They were able to kind of slow him down and completely stop him. And they took away the run game, which was pretty big as well. So I was impressed with the Packers defense here. I don't know how much it translates into the playoffs, but I certainly think that that's a good sign to see the game before, considering that was the unit that I was concerned about. So good win for the Packers. And once again, cannot be understated how important it is to take care of your business, because we saw a team like Jacksonville wasn't able to do it against a divisional opponent who has a worse record than Chicago.
Yeah. So, and yeah, we'll see. Obviously, we mentioned the Bears. They got a lot of interesting options. I'm sure we'll go over that ad nauseum into the offseason, at least until the pick is until they either trade away the pick or until the pick's actually made by them and it's not a quarterback. Or they move Justin Fields too. That would obviously be an indication of where they're going if they do move him, because obviously I would assume they would do it beforehand, but we've seen it before where they couldn't, like with Josh Rosen. I know it's a little bit different with Josh Rosen, but when the Cardinals got Kyler, all of a sudden it was pretty difficult. It was like a second round pick that they had is what all they got back. So
right,
we'll see if the Bears try to avoid that, if that's the direction they take going forward. And like I said, we'll talk about it next episode. But the Packers in Dallas, we get to meet again in the playoffs in Jerry's world. So like I said, talk about that next.
By the way, Packers have never lost in Jerry's world.
Yeah, but hey, new regime, like I said, new young team. We'll go over all
that.
The
bad man is gone. Yeah. The bad man is gone.
Well, Aaron Jones also loves playing in Texas and UTEP. Yeah. So that might, and he's healthy right now. He may be the only healthy back we have because we'll see what happens if AJ can get back healthy.
Aaron Jones has had his moments against Dallas, but he was not the one that crushed my hopes and dreams.
That's true.
All right, he wasn't the one that could make those dimes to Jared Cook on the sideline. All right.
And by the way, I don't think he meant. We'll see because he goes on I forget when he goes on that show with Pat McAfee. But I already texted in our group chat I feel like Aaron is going to try to take a little bit of credit here in regards to like we said. Don't be shocked if he does, but maybe I'm saving and. I'll mention next episode, but we'll let Chips fall before I say anything. Anyway, because I feel like he's going to try to do it if Green Bay somehow beats Dallas. I guarantee you he's going to be like, oh yeah, see, thank you. He's going to do the thing where he's like, yeah, I told Jordan this, and I just love Aaron, but
he definitely will.
Kind of being a look at me Louie at the moment. So anyway, Packers.
Slightly unrelated question before we move on. How do you feel about Jordan Love at the end of the season here? I mean, he was, I think, 4th in the league in touchdown passes.
Yeah.
And, he kind of figured it out towards the middle of the year, had a really solid second half. Like, I don't necessarily feel like I've seen a lot of people talking about Jordan Love, but how do you personally feel just before the playoffs so we don't have that potentially cloud the judgment? Because, I mean, if the Packers win that game, I feel like so many people are all of a sudden going to start hyping up Jordan Love and the Packers like crazy. Yeah,
I think I would say that ultimately I'm impressed, and I am very confident. I'm pretty confident. I wouldn't say very, but pretty confident going forward. And like I said, no matter what happens in Dallas, even if he throws 6 interceptions and goes 2 for 20, I could chalk it up to a bad game. I've seen a lot of good things from him. Like I've mentioned, I think in the last breakdown we did, he's gotten better in regards to finding his hot reads and just his answers, especially in regards to blitz or pressure. And it's seeming like he's just more confident in reading coverages and just letting it go. So granted, there's still times where he is off, mechanically. There are days and, there's a couple games you can look at where Jordan didn't throw the ball well that day. So those still, but that's with a young quarterback. It's still his first start or his first season starting. So for the most part, it's been really good. I'm really impressed. And like I said, I'll mention in the breakdown, but I like this offense better than the past couple of years than with Aaron Rodgers, just because I feel like Jordan's he's looking to let it go, let it rip, and get those big plays. While Rodgers, and understandably so, he's more of a veteran, but he was more looking to just keep the drive going. Hey, first downs, be a little more of that, and then he'll be tactical when he took his shots. While Jordan's he's looking for the big shot every play. So I like that in terms of I think it's helped. It's a big reason why our offense has gotten better because as you know, we've had running back cycle in and out. I mean, Christian Watson's been in and out, mostly out, for the year. So we've had to rely on Jaden Reed, who once again I'm glad we've looking solid as a receiver. And then even some of these other no names like Dontavian Wicks has had moments, and Bo Melton. So yeah, I've been like what I'm seeing for the most part to answer your question in regard to Love. And yeah, I'm excited for the future. And I think, I at least would give him at least 2 years at this point. I know midway through the season, I was like, okay, let's give him one more year. But at this point, I'm down for at least 2 more of Jordan Love. So,
I would agree.
Those are my thoughts. So we'll see. Obviously, we'll see what happens going forward. But very, very high on him now. So good. Kudos to him for proving, Brian G may be right. We'll see. Anyhow, let's go on to the last but not least game of Week 18 and the regular season. And that is the Buffalo Bills getting the big win over the Miami Dolphins to win the division and get the number 2 seed. So that's just a wild come up because, like we mentioned before, heading into the week, there was a possibility if certain things fell a certain way that the Bills lose, that they would not even be in the playoffs. But nonetheless, they punched their ticket and get the number 2 seed and the NFC East title over the Dolphins, winning 21-14. Your thoughts here, John?
I mean, great win from the Bills. You know, you want to talk about teams that are getting hot at the right time. Following that, the stretch where they lost to the Bengals and Broncos back to back in November, they beat the Jets. They do lose to the Eagles in overtime, but we talked about that game. You know, like they very well could have won that one. I'm pretty sure they like choked kind of and the defensively at the end too, to allow Philly to even tie the ball game to go to OT. But they beat the Jets, lose that game. They beat the Chiefs. They crushed my Cowboys. They beat the Chargers. They beat the Patriots. They beat the Dolphins. So they've won 6 out of their last 7 games. They're getting hot at the right time. I think it's no coincidence that James Cook has really become more involved during that time span. And, Josh Allen, I think he just felt like he's playing more carefree. Like it seemed like, I'm not saying that he necessarily was bothered by all the turnovers and everybody's talking about it so much, but it feels like Josh has started to play more like Josh. Like, okay, yeah, he threw 2 picks in this game, but he also led the team in rushing. He threw for 360 yards. Like he was making the big plays that we're kind of accustomed to seeing. And that was good to see. We also saw Stephon Diggs kind of get back in the mix in this game. Khalil Shakir had a big game as well. So, yeah, I thought this was a good, resilient win from the Bills because the Dolphins were pretty effective at taking away James Cook, who has, kind of been the focal point of the second half of the season here. So it showed once again that this is a Buffalo team that nobody wants to play right now because they know how to win in multiple ways. If you try to shut down the passing game, they're okay to run it like they did against Dallas and let James Cook eat you alive. If you take away the run game, then as we saw in this game, it might not be pretty, but they can do it. They can make it happen. So a good win from the Bills. They are now the 2nd seed in the AFC, which, like you said, is pretty crazy considering the season they've had and being able to finish with that result and playing in Buffalo. I mean, that's a huge home field advantage. And although the Ravens have definitely been the best team in the league this year, there's no doubt that I feel like out of every year for both conferences, this maybe less over the NFC because I don't think there's as many options out of the NFC, but you could really see any possible Super Bowl matchup. Like it doesn't necessarily feel like there's a shoe-in team like the Chiefs have been the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, there's no outwardly dominant team that's even well-rounded too. We've all seen these teams and have their holes. I mean, Bills are, I was already thinking like, oh man, Bills are going to be a scary wild card team, but even, now they're number 2 seed, they're still going to be a scary team. Like you mentioned, how their defense has been playing in recent weeks. And they can win in different ways, something we haven't seen. Hey, they can't. This game was a little bit on Josh Allen, but like you mentioned, other people stepped up besides Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, and contributed. And game honestly could have been worse. I mean, he had that. I will say the first interception was pretty bad. Obviously, I think he, like, if anything, throw it away, Josh, or throw it where no one can get it. Live to get a field goal instead of 0 points like he did. And then second interception was bad. Honestly, I think it was better that they intercepted it because it was a touchback as opposed to, I don't know if you remember, it was a 4th down play too. So like Miami would have better field position if they just knocked the ball down. So I was like, okay, and like Gabe Davis fell over, so I think he just tripped on himself too, like as he was throwing it. So a little unfortunate there. And then even the fumble, like that was just a really good play by Christian Wilkins by getting behind Josh, and so that's like can't really fault that on Josh too much. But otherwise, like it was. And then, yes, he missed, because I want to point these out because there's going to be the people that are just, especially to and on, I'll say it, that are obviously just very against Josh Allen. But yes, he did miss Stephon Diggs on that one bomb. But other than that, he hit Stephon Diggs on every other target. That was the one target he missed on Stephon Diggs. And I know it sucked, but for the most part, like you mentioned, via the air, via the run, he did it all. I mean, there's that crucial 15-yard run that he had where he like ran through 4 people. Like once again, like this, he's probably one of the only few. Like even Lamar's more finesse speed. He's not going to run through people. Maybe Jalen Hurts would be like maybe or Dak in his prime running too would maybe be able to do that. But Josh consistently does it. He's awesome. And once again, like when he's one of those quarterbacks, you got to live with the bad because for the most part he's going to do good. Just hopefully hone in on the bad. And for the Dolphins, I feel like our concerns are more are validated. 13 targets, 7 receptions for Tyreek Hill, and after that, it was your boy Durham Smythe. 3 for 30, good for him. But once again, after that, like no one else really scared obviously anyone. I know they may get back Jalen Waddle, but Bills were seemingly all over what Miami did, and like we want to evaluate interceptions. Tua, that first interception, he had Tyreek if he was able to put the ball out more, but like we've mentioned before, a little concern with throw power. You left it behind Tyreek, and the corner was able to intercept it because, like I said, Tyreek had him beat. He had the touchdown if you let him. And like, hey, once again, like people just to compare, Josh missed the on that open one. Like he'd rather overthrow than underthrow, and that's the reason why he'd rather overthrow. I know it looks worse in that context, but yeah. And then obviously the pick at the end. I think it was just a little bit of good anticipation, but once again, like he doesn't have the arm strength to just zip it in there before the safety can come over and react and get snag the ball or deflect it. We saw that a couple times too, where when they did throw kind of the go route to even to Tyreek at times, like he was being met by the safety like almost instantly. Sometimes he'd catch it, and oftentimes it would be knocked out. So that's a tough loss because now, like we mentioned with Bills, they get home field for the most part. Now Miami, you're gonna have to go to Kansas City next week, and even if you beat the Chiefs, you're gonna have to go probably to Buffalo or Baltimore, one of these outdoor places where the elements are also going to be against you, as opposed to nice, cool Miami. And this is a speed team too, and especially in the cold, they tend to get worse. And even next week, just to give a little preface, it's already being reported that it's going to be the single digits in Kansas City. So it's going to be a cold game. So it'd be interesting to see. We'll get to see. We really get to see some of the top arm strength on one side versus, once again, not that he's not, but some of the middle of the pack in terms of Tua. But yeah.
And I just want to add on Tua with the Dolphins stuff. Like the one thing that I really noticed watching this game was the Dolphins, like Tua and the Dolphins offense, I hadn't really paid attention as much as I had in this one. Like I did for the Cowboys one, but that one was a little different. Just because of like certain like schematic things that the Cowboys do defensively that allow certain things to happen. But they're kind of the opposite of like the issue I always had with Jalen Hurts, where Hurts doesn't really throw over the middle well. Mm-hmm. Tua could, like, it was a struggle to see any play throw to the sideline. I mean, even you look at that last interception, like it was an attempted throw to the sideline, but it just feels like it's so difficult for this offense to utilize the boundaries. And I think that's obviously partially on Tua, maybe partially because Jalen Waddle's out. There's factors to that, right? But it's just interesting because Buffalo knew that. Like, it was very obvious they knew that the way that they were playing defense, because there was a lot of times that there were plays to be made on those sidelines. Even that interception that Tua threw at the end of the game, if the ball came out a little bit sooner with a little bit more zip, I think the completion's there. But it was a little underthrown. It came out a little bit late. It allowed the guys to get back in the play, and then they get the interception. So it makes it hard pressed to wonder, like, can the Dolphins overcome that against a good defense like Kansas City next week? We'll talk about that more next episode, but it's definitely a concern, because when your quarterback has such a clear problem with specific parts of the field, we've seen historically that defenses key on that so heavily in the playoffs. I remember the first year the Eagles made the playoffs with Jalen Hurts, the Buccaneers completely ignored the middle of the field, and they just took away the sidelines because they knew that's all that Jalen Hurts was comfortable with and would throw to, and it threw off the Eagles' game plan entirely. We've seen that with Lamar Jackson in the past, because he wasn't at the start of his career that great at throwing to the sidelines, so teams would focus so heavily on trying to take away the middle of the field and try to force him to throw to the sidelines, and didn't always work in the playoffs. And so it's just something to look out for with the Dolphins. Hopefully they get Jalen Waddle back, because I do think that plays a part in it, but it's also just kind of the unfortunate reality of when you get a quarterback who doesn't have the greatest arm strength.
Yeah, it limits.
And is short, too. That's a factor as well.
Yeah, and it just limits some of the throws that he can make. It's a bit of a knock. I'm not trying to hate on it, but it's not hate on the guy. It's just being realistic. That's why we've been saying this from the jump. This was a concern from the jump.
And for the record, I'm not only saying this to hit on Tua, because like I've said this about Joe Burrow before as well. Like I've said that he doesn't necessarily have like the arm strength to make some of those sideline throws that a Herbert or an Allen or a Mahomes can make. And Joe Burrow was a top 5 quarterback for me in my ranking. Yeah. So,
and even then, like he he still had like he improved. He's improved on a little bit coming in. Granted, still
Yeah.
not as amazing as those guys, obviously. But yeah, like he had even then he's still not. He's I would say about league average there, but look, he's elite everywhere else. But anyway, yeah, we'll see how this fast Dolphins team, if they can get healthy, of course, and if they can translate to the cold weather of Kansas City and and the rightful Tyreek Hill quote unquote revenge game, as we'll get next week, amongst and many other. Got a lot of great headlines, man, for Wild Card Weekend. Like I said, the script doesn't disappoint. So we'll of course preview that next episode. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we call it there?
That's gonna be it. We'll see what other you want to make any predictions? Maybe what other coaches possibly get fired here? Obviously, Arthur Smith's gone and Ron Rivera's gone. But you think there's any other jobs that open up?
I'm looking right now at the standings. Just
Chargers Raiders coaches already got fired earlier in the year. I've heard maybe some rumblings about Vrabel. I don't fully know.
I think I'll put stamp Vrabel safe. I feel like it's a tough year for them.
We already talked about Belichick. That's a possibility.
I honestly,
Giants, they did part ways with Wink Martindale. So
really,
there's that.
That's interesting because I thought, if anything, their defense was solid at times. That'd be very. He's an interesting piece that could be signed elsewhere.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think I would say I'm gonna say Bill Belichick. I know you're not, but I would say Bill is out personally if I had to bet. Otherwise,
what do you think about Eberflus? Do you think he stays? I know. I think I saw a report that
I think he stays because he's a defensive guy, and we did see like the defense got better and turned a corner. And hey, the offense wasn't too bad at the end too. I won't be shocked if that's one where they maybe let's bring in an extra guy or two on offense just for in case they have to do a coordinator switch or bring in new ideas or something. I honestly think he's safe. So I also think too. I would say Belichick out, but Vrabel safe. I guess those are like kind of the last two hot, warm seats.
Do you think there's any coaches, and I ask this because I believe this personally about Mike McCarthy, that if they significantly underwhelm in the playoffs, that they might be on the chopping block? I believe if the Cowboys, if they get embarrassed in the wild card or divisional round, that he's done.
I think in the wild card, if you guys lose in the wild card, I think he will be let go.
The only reason I believe it about the divisional round is because the team that they'd be playing is the Eagles, the Buccaneers, or the Lions. And they've beaten two of those already. And they'd be at home. And I guess it just depends on how they lose, but that's just kind of my thought process. Yeah, I think he would be. If they get to the conference championship, then I think he's safe.
Okay. Yeah, obviously if he could be fired if he goes to Divisional 2, like you mentioned, if it's a blowout, I do agree with that. But I think definitely wild card, just because it seems like Jerry's already a little bit on the fence. I'm not saying he's like gung ho about it, but obviously if you get embarrassed in the wild card, to a team that quote unquote had less expectations, even though we really need to kind of throw those out at this point, because once again it's a matchup league, and oftentimes the better team doesn't win. Sometimes like the Patriots, they weren't always the more talented team, but when they're running the show, but they always had good plans of attack because it's only one game. But so anyway. I didn't think about that.
Last two coaches I wanted to mention. What thoughts on Sirianni and Todd Bowles? Right,
yeah, Todd Bowles. I think Todd's safe just because he's no one, once again, Baker Mayfield, I think they exceeded expectations, and there's still stuff to build on. We'll see what happens if they keep going forward. But I think he's safe. Honestly, I think Sirianni's safe, but it's gonna be like, especially if they lose in the first round, it's gonna be like, hey Nick, like you gotta shake up your, like we mentioned, you gotta shake up your, you gotta bring in an OC and or a DC that is established that we know can get us back on track. Because I feel like the GM, as I forget, it's Howie's the GM, right? I always mix up him and Jeffrey Loria, the owner.
Yeah, Howie Roseman.
Yeah, I think Roseman's, because Roseman would be like, hey, listen, like I got you all this talent, dude. You know what I mean? So like, it's not me. It wasn't my fault that because usually that's what happens is we see oftentimes the coach gets let go before the GM. Because it seems like the GM is more willing to place the blame on the coach because they're literally more in the ear of the owner.
I could see him maybe get fired if they get like completely embarrassed by the Buccaneers.
Yeah, if it's if it's like 30-7 or something, like something that's just like
wow, like that's so bad that I could see it maybe. But yeah, I would agree that I mean they went to the Super Bowl last year, so I think that's still got to be playing in your mind. But I say that when Peterson only got fired like 2 years after winning it, right?
Yeah,
like it
2
wasn't
years
that
after
long.
winning it.
So that's the only reason that I bring Sirianni up. Because if this was another organization, I don't think there'd be as much of a question. But the Eagles have shown the ability to move on very quickly. Because how many coaches would win a Super Bowl and get at least another 5 years guaranteed?
Yeah, but it's tough because, as we always say, the grass isn't always greener. So if you let go of Sirianni, you don't know if the next guy could, like, you know what I mean? You don't know if the next guy coming in is going to have the same impact. And like we talked about before, you're stuck with Jalen Hurts because you gave him the biggest contract in NFL history. So it's not like you can, adjust. Next guy can adjust the roster or you can adjust the roster on the fly. Saying you isn't the Eagles front office, So,
Right.
And yeah, I got some big pieces going down the pipeline. Other pieces contract wise too, probably. So, we'll see what happens. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see how the dominoes fall in regards to coaching stuff, especially the Bill Belichick. I think is to me the most interesting domino to see if they let him go. And then where will he go, and such?
Yeah.
And then who do they get?
I feel like there's just in terms of like the very interesting storylines of the offseason. Does Chicago trade that pick?
Yes.
Or well, I guess
I think they will.
More likely, do they keep Justin Fields? Like that's the big question. I think they're probably going to keep him just because they had like we talked about. They won like 6 of the last 7 or something like that.
Yeah,
they had a really
he
good
missed
end
like
of the
3 or
season.
4 games, unfortunately. It's just unfortunate.
Yeah, and we talked about that whole scenario of like maybe the Patriots trade up and they can get Marvin Harrison still, so that all that. And then obviously the Chargers got